freaking windows.
Well, the sun's supposed to come back tomorrow. So. Oh,
Recording in progress.
Bingo.
How was this so difficult?
Yep. It's in the clock.
There we go.
All right, we will call this meeting to order, the Catholic Regional District Planning Committee for Wednesday, August 7th. I'd like to acknowledge we're holding the meeting today on the traditional territory of the Kahlon Nation. And our first order of business is approval of our agenda. Do I have a mover?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Director Gisborne, I see Director McCormick there with her hand.
Yeah, thank you. I'm having a technical thing. There's a bar across the top, people who are in the meeting, and you can't see if somebody has their hand up. I mean, I can't see the little boxes. It says this meeting is being recorded, and that's blotting out the individuals who are attending the meeting. Am I explaining that right?
Corporate officer.
How do I get rid of that?
There should be a little blue button that says, thank you, Chair. There should be a little blue button that says, okay. If you click that, where it says this meeting is going to be recorded.
Oh, see. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Sorry.
Great. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, just before we adopt our agenda, I just wanted to speak to something. The minutes that are coming up, I believe, are an accurate reflection of what occurred at a recent planning committee. I put forward a motion that I think was a bit too green for the assembly at the time. A motion was made but not seconded, but then there was a very similar motion that was made and seconded to then refer the previous motion to staff. That was defeated. A notice of motion was made that was not substantially different from the defeated motion. So there might be some question as to, whether this motion on the agenda, was already defeated at the previous meeting. So,
I think we all understand the intent and your explanation of how we got here. Maybe I'll just defer to the corporate officer. Are we in good standing with our new business? I don't have to kind of bring this as my opportunity to bring items back, but I see we have it under new business.
So the notice of motion was given. It is similar to something that was decided on. I wasn't quite sure if that if you were going to bring it forward for reconsideration, or if this was going to stand how it is. It is not, it would be better to address it procedurally, correct? So by having the chair bring it forward.
Well, I would like to follow procedure. So if we could do that, I'd like to do so.
So have the chair bring it forward for reconsideration. So that
would also go under 9.1 as the new. Okay. Let's take a note here.
my understanding is the item will be reconsidered as is written in the agenda. Yes.
That's my understanding too. with the change.
Well, it's essentially the same item, right?
Yes, so thank you. So now procedurally, the chair is asking for an item to be reconsidered.
Okay. Great. Okay, with that change, we have a mover. We need a seconder. We have a seconder for the agenda. Oh, I see Director McCormick. Thank you. Great. Any discussion on the agenda? Being none, all those in favor? Great, motion is carried. Thank you. Next order, adoption of the minutes. We have, okay, Director Gisborne, Director Brander. Any errors or omissions, changes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried, thank you. Next, we do have a delegation, it looks like, 4.1, Lyndsey Smith, Program Manager, Coastal Douglas-Fir Conservation Partnership, regarding a field verification of land cover mapping. Hope I got that right.
A bit.
Great. So just before you get started, Ms. Smith, I think you understand we have some parameters, 10 minutes for your presentation, and then another 10 for some questions, just questions at the end for the directors. Thank you. Go ahead.
Let me just share my screen. There we go. So can everybody see a green presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so my name is Lyndsey Smith, and I'm from the Program Manager for the Coastal Douglas-Fir Conservation Partnership. So the presentation today is for 3 parts. So I'm going to share information about mapping that we're doing for the Action for Adaptation Biodiversity Atlas. I'm going to talk to you about a community verification process that we're doing for land cover mapping. And I'm also going to ask if the Cathet Regional District will re-sign our statement of cooperation. So who are the partnership? We're a collection of organizations, agencies, and land managers who are aiming to protect the coastal Douglas-Fir ecosystems. And we're going to do that through sound science, Indigenous knowledge, shared information, and supportive policies and community education. And the red line boundary shows you our interest area and also shows you where the coastal Douglas-Fir moist maritime ecosystem is, and also the coastal western hemlock extra moist. So what is Action for Adaptation? So it's a collaborative project with ourselves, UBC Okanagan, and the UBC Botanical Gardens. And what we're trying to do is provide decision support tools for local governments and First Nations around climate adaptation and biodiversity protection. And at the center of that is a tool called the Biodiversity Atlas for the Southwest Coast. And we're going to wrap around that policy and then information around incentives as well. So you've seen the red line boundary already. The blue line boundary is the boundary for the Biodiversity Atlas itself. And that's basically coming to the top of the catchment to be able to protect those ecosystems that are downstream of it. And how did we get here? So we started by talking with planners, elected officials, mapping experts, identified where the gaps were in terms of mapping. We checked whether those gaps were correct in terms of a workshop that we held in 2022. We've been speaking to the First Nations, of which we've got 63 in our area. And we did a pilot, which I'm going to present to you for the Sunshine Coast, looking at some of the mapping layers. So these are the 6 layers that we're focusing on for the Biodiversity Atlas, and there's 2 streams. One is we're looking at provincial mapping tools that are already out there, but maybe we're not using in terms of local government planning. And the other side of it is using satellite and LiDAR to try and see if we can do mapping in a more intelligent, fast, cost-effective way. So I'm now going to focus down on the sort of environmentally sensitive areas mapping and the hydrologically sensitive areas. So this is an idea called the natural range of variability and risk, which was brought through the Old Growth Strategic Review. And it's the basic principle of how much natural landscape can be altered before species are lost. So if you think about the whole, if you took 30% away, the system is likely to still function. But if you think about that whole and you take away 70%, the chances are that that system will start to fail and struggle. So when we think about old growth, if we think about the CDF, naturally there would only be about 29% of old growth because fire in that system is normal. So when we're sort of saying how much old growth is around, we would take that into consideration. But what you're seeing in this image is those lower areas, the red areas where there was high quality timber. We haven't really got the old growth that we need to have those healthy ecosystems functioning. So thinking about some of the mapping layers that we're actually producing. So one of them is the ecological communities at risk. So if you went to the province and said what information is currently available, they would share this image with you. Now, what this is showing is where the province has actually done the analysis to pull this information out. It's not where those ecological communities at risk actually are. So what we did as part of this project is we actually looked at all of the terrestrial ecosystem mapping that's currently available from the province and extracted all of this information to identify where the potential ecological communities at risk are on the landscape. And this is a flagging tool. You'd still need a consultant to go out and double check on the ground, but it's providing local governments with more information to help them in terms of their guiding decisions. And one of the things in terms of the information from the CDC was you'd only have 19 ecological communities, whereas this is picking up 59 of those potential ecological communities at risk. Similar situation when we talk about sensitive ecosystems. This is something that you often see in your official community plans. If we look for our area of interest at the moment, in 2005, this is what the province provided, focused very much on the coastal areas. And what we've done is using, again, the terrestrial ecosystem mapping and vegetation resource inventory, we've been able to pull that up all the way across the region to help in terms of decision making. We've looked at the hydro riparian and pulled together a lot of those layers that you'll be using to try and pick up key areas on the landscape. And this is becoming increasingly important as we face climate change, changing conditions, hotter, drier conditions. So it's really important for us to know where are our sensitive hydro riparian ecosystems on the landscape. The final layer that I'll talk to you about is this concept of climate micro-refugia. So these are if you think about those summers that are going to be warmer and drier for longer, we're going to have to find places where our species are able to have a bit of respite in terms of cooler conditions for them to be able to survive, and also have connectivity across the landscape for them to be able to move and respond to those changing climate conditions. So on the left are some of the features that we've looked at, but on the right, I've just put up why the Old Growth Strategic Review has identified those older forests, and then also where they've identified in the orange where recruitment forest is needed. So thinking back to that red image, we're seeing that we need to fill in some old growth lower down the slope. So this is the image that we produce in terms of the climate micro-refugia. And what you're seeing is those stream corridors going to provide some of those great refugia areas, as well as some of the older forests that's on the landscape. So that kind of gave you an overview of the work we've been doing, looking at using provincial tools and just translating them into a format that's more accessible for local governments. The other side of this project is that satellite and LiDAR. And at the moment, what we're doing is a community science project where we're trying to get everybody out to help us in terms of moving technology forward. So if we look at the product on the left, this is produced by the federal government, very good high quality product that's produced every 5 years at a 30-meter resolution. But what we got told by local governments is that isn't sufficient when thinking about local government planning and making decisions. So we're aiming to get to a 3-meter resolution, which is what is shown on the right-hand side. But what we actually need, so we've got the satellites, we've got the LiDAR, and we have a model, but we have to teach the model exactly what is on the landscape. So what we're trying to do is hopefully engage the wider community to help us to do some of that field verification. If you think back to my blue boundary at the beginning, that's a very big area for us to cover. So the best thing to do is trying to get the community involved in the process, and they can also contribute to decision making in the long term. So coming back to kind of what my asks were on this very quick tour of all of this information, the first ask was to consider using the mapping layers that we've generated into your planning processes. The second part was to help us promote this community science exercise. And thirdly is to re-sign to the Statement of Cooperation. So the intent of the Statement of Cooperation is to indicate that we are all working together to protect these natural environments. It doesn't commit you in terms of funding or anything like that. It's more the fact that we are hoping to protect these natural environments. And you have previously signed to it. The reason we're asking you to re-sign is that we've changed the language within the Statement of Cooperation to basically better reflect the role that First Nations have and have had in terms of the management of the landscape. And that was it from me. So thank you very much, as in that was probably quite quick, but if you've got any questions, I'll be grateful to receive them.
No, well, thank you, Ms. Smith. That was good time management. So I think we'll just start with some questions from directors. I see Director McCormick's hand. Oh, I think you're on mute, Director McCormick.
Sorry. Technology has never been my strong suit.
All good.
So thank you. I do have a question, and that is what your level of connectedness is to the planning staff of the regions that you're working with, and how planning staff can be informed about the really valuable work that you're doing. Because I think this is great. Living on an island full of forests, surrounded by water, this is really critical work. So my question is about that connectivity with staff.
So we travelled up to Powell River and met with the planners from the regional district, also from the City of Powell River and Kahlon First Nation last week, just to present on this work. There's a report that accompanies the bulk of the layers that have already been generated, and then also the GIS files, which we've shared with the planners as well. We had some feedback in terms of potentially making some of the information simpler to be able to digest, but we are making that connection.
Thank you.
Any other questions, directors?
Thank you, Chair. So I have just a couple of questions, two actually, So the study area seems to be like an area that might have a ton of private lands in it. What is the percentage of private land versus non-private lands that is within your study area?
I can't tell you specifically in terms of this breakdown. We have been just doing some numbers recently for the CWHXM1 and the CDF, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but we're in about sort of 60%, I think, that's private land. But I couldn't tell you for the Cathet region itself.
Right. So I guess what I wanted to know is if we're doing highly, like you'd want to target people with private lands to have them understand a lot of this information and how much of the private land management matters when it comes to this topic, because the bulk of it is private lands. And so I guess that must be part of your education process, I suppose.
Yes, and one of the things that we're hoping is that potentially when it comes to things like community engagement, the planners themselves will be able to use this material to have discussions with the wider community. We're open to suggestions as well as to whether you think there are other routes that we could use to promote this information.
Well, I immediately noticed that the gaps in your data are because they're in private land areas and not forest company areas, which have all the layers sort of sorted out for forest management. It's not necessarily done on the private land areas. So then my other question was, as global warming happens and the biogeoclimatic zones change, are those study area boundaries going to change? Is that maybe the purpose of the climate micro refugia, is because those are the areas that the biogeoclimatic zone will shrink into? Is that kind of how I'm reading it?
The zone won't shrink into them, as in you're right, as in there's going to be some shifting in terms of the zones and they'll move. And the report kind of talks to that in more detail. The best thing to think about is that they're just going to be the wetter and the moister locations. So potentially in terms of if you were thinking about species loss that might occur to climate change, you'd be correct in saying that the species might be moving into those areas to be able to survive the change and also move away from some of those drier conditions into more suitable areas. What was the sort of beginning part of the question? Forgive me. I think one of the things I just wanted to pick up was on that concept of missing on private land. The terrestrial ecosystem mapping in your region does actually extend onto the private land. So the gaps that you're seeing are probably just a case of where we're saying, for example, in terms of ecological communities at risk, the difference between they aren't in these locations versus they are.
Thank you.
Thanks. I just have a quick question. Sorry.
It's okay.
On page 10 of 20, the NVR area, I just noticed, of course, looking at my particular area, the blue area. What does the blue area identify? I see the red. You talked a little bit about the red. Just curious about what that's indicating up in area 8.
Yep. So if you can imagine, we've got kind of two extremes. So I talked about that if you lose 30%, you're unlikely to have a significant impact on the ecosystems. Whereas I said, if you lost 70%, the chances are you're going to have impacts in terms of species loss. In the middle of that, the sort of the blue zone is the area where you're likely to start having losses, but we're not quite sure when or how they would occur. So the idea being, obviously, in terms of old growth, you want to start moving as far as you can do towards the green, but there's other realities in terms of socioeconomics that you need to be thinking about as well. So it's more that sort of the blue is, if you can think about in terms of science, the sort of slight imprecise nature of we don't know exactly when a species would blink out.
Okay, thank you for that. And just quickly, I noticed you've mentioned work with various ministries, local government. What about forest companies themselves? You know, we've had delegation recently from a forest company. We hear a lot of good words, but obviously to mature as a company, are you sharing this material? Is there engagement?
We're right at the beginning of this sort of process. So if you can imagine, for the last 2 years, we've been listening to what people are saying, and now we're at the point where we're starting to communicate out to people. Our target audience is very much local governments and First Nations to help in terms of their decision making. But by no means is in. We've been talking to Kahlon. We've also been talking to Chichel First Nation, and they're obviously involved in terms of forestry and also the landscape planning tables. So the information is kind of filtering in that way, but we haven't been doing targeted conversations yet with forestry.
Great, that kind of puts me on your timeline a bit better. So thank
Yeah.
you for that. Director Gisborne.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for your presentation. Love the data. So my eyes are good, but they're not that good. So I'm wondering, is this multi-layer data like publicly available? Because I'd really like to dig into it. I know I got constituents that'd like to dig into it. And it sounds like, you know, there's kind of a desire to try and make sure that what's on the map is actually what's occurring on the ground. So I'm seeing some nods, so that's good. And then one of my other questions was, when we have this agreement, a lot of my understanding is we're trying to protect the coastal Douglas-Fir environment. And we have very limited land use regulations. We do in our solid waste management plan have invasive species. And I noticed on page 17 of 20, the community land cover field verification, in the picture, the individual is standing on English ivy, which, as I'm aware, is deadly to a lot of Douglas firs. It grows up the side and kills the tree. So when we have this agreement, is that something that, you know, we can also help focus on, is, you know, preserving the ecosystems and, you know, removing invasive species that are actually targeting these sensitive ecosystems?
Good question.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, exactly that. So yes, first question is yes, the layers are publicly available. And the second bit, in terms of the stages that we need to go through now, is improving them in terms of having conversations with people and correcting them. If we think about the provincial mapping, it's done at a 1 to 20,000 scale. So there's some, you know, there's tweaking definitely that you can do there to improve the quality and the accuracy. And we might do that with our satellite project as well, in terms of using some of the layers that we develop. There's potentially ways that we can use technology to improve some of that as well. In terms of the statement of cooperation, exactly, that's it. Is in, we haven't been prescriptive within the statement of cooperation as to how you would do it as a regional district, because everybody's going to approach it differently depending on your constituency and how you want to focus. You know, land acquisition, the control of invasive species, the use of your zoning regulations to be able to protect the natural environment. These are all ways and tools, obviously, that you have available to you to help in terms of protecting. And it's when we talk about, obviously, I'm called the Coastal Douglas-Fir Conservation Partnership, but in terms of your area, the coastal western hemlock extra dry is the bulk of the ecosystem that we're specifically talking about. That's very fragile, and it's those dry ecosystems that are very unique to our area around the Salish Sea that we're trying to protect.
Okay. We're a bit over time. We do agree usually on extending our time with everybody's agreement. I see Ms. Rodden also has her hand up, so I see some thumbs up, Ms. Rodden.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, I just wanted to pick up on the question about whether Lyndsey and CDFDP are collaborating with planning staff. And yes, I've been communicating with Lyndsey, and Charisse Roberts and Caleb Allen attended the meeting last week. that Lyndsey referred to, and we're seeing a couple of benefits in the near future from accessing this data. One is Caleb Allen, our lead GIS technologist, can add the data to our internal GIS, so we can use it in landscape analysis when we're looking at land use applications. And also we can use it in the Savory Island OCP in our landscape analysis to inform that and where the sensitive ecosystems occur on the island. And the other piece of work it's going to benefit is asset management and planning are collaborating on doing a natural asset management inventory. And this data will inform that process as well. So I'm happy about the work they've done.
Great, that fills in a lot of stuff for us. Now I understand, you know, you've identified 3 asks, mapping, need of a statement, and what was the third again?
It's just support. So maybe through your sort of communication channels, etc. I don't know whether you've got Facebook or something similar like that, but it's promoting the idea. The other option is also you might have staff such as park staff or engineers that are out and about, just making them aware that there's an opportunity. It only takes, you know, a matter of minutes to pick up these points as people are around. So it's just what means do we have to kind of actually promote this? The idea being that then the community is kind of feeling part of all the sort of decision-making process as these layers get developed.
Okay, I think coming out of this, Director Cormac. You can share the mute button, I know.
Sorry, I just wondered, Chair, at what point you would entertain a motion for us to sign the partnership?
You read my mind. You're making that motion?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Premature?
Typically, we would refer an item like this towards staff.
That's what I was wondering about.
Yeah, and so we typically would refer it to staff to bring back a staff report.
Yeah, thank you, Corporate Officer. My instincts telling me the same thing. There's a few elements here, and we want to get this right. So yeah, that's the appropriate to refer to staff.
That's a motion, though.
Yeah.
It's just a discussion about your motion, right? So, Director McCormick.
Yeah. So then the motion would be that the issue be referred to staff for report back to future planning committee regarding signing the partnership with the conservation initiative.
Okay, thank you, Director Gisborne. Seconded. Any discussion on the matter? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, and thank you for your presentation, Director Elliott.
Very quick question.
Yes.
So I've noticed in the sensitive ecosystems map that there's freshwater blue that's a darker blue, and all of Paul Wick is not considered freshwater on this map, and I was curious about that.
Okay, maybe one quick explanation and then we'll move on.
It's technical, yeah.
Yes.
I didn't actually hear it. As in, I heard that you were saying there was a lake that didn't, a specific lake that doesn't show up in the freshwater.
14, yeah, 14 of.
So the sensitive ecosystems map in the presentation has all of Powell Lake not covered freshwater, and I just wondered what that's about. Is it considered something other than freshwater?
No, I think it's just the way in which the mapping has been done, probably just due to the scale of it. But I can take it back to the mappers and just ask as to why it turns up. Is flagged up differently.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. The next map actually shows it in a nice blue there. So it's got salt water. Okay, well, thanks for your presentation.
I was wondering.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Okay. All right. We are on to unfinished business. I don't see any on our agenda. We have several items of correspondence. Just of note, we did some, in my area there was some follow-up correspondence around logging that we didn't capture last month. So we put it in there, but we've discussed that quite a bit. Any other business arising? Not seeing any on here. No reports, new business, 9.1. We do have our establish a working group. I brought that back. The agenda has been changed, recommending that the board direct staff to establish a working group for the purpose of increasing diversity of housing in relation to the QRD official community plans and zoning bylaws. Do I have a mover? Oh, or sorry, are we gonna do a discussion first?
No, sorry, so you're bringing it back, so we would
Yes.
consider you the mover.
Ah, that's how it works. Okay, good.
Uh,
I just need a seconder. Okay, great. Director.
Second.
Discussion. Director Gizmo.
Yeah, my first question was, this is the first time I've been in a committee where we have a motion to establish a working group. So I'm not sure if it is the correct motion. I'm not sure if it should, asking for staff to draft terms of reference, or if it should be more specific in relation to our housing policies in the OCP. That's just kind of my first thoughts for like general discussion, but now we have a motion on the floor. So I will speak more specific to the motion. And I presume that if this motion passes, that between this meeting and the board meeting, we can hopefully clarify a more accurate motion. So this is one of the reasons why I put this item before us. The planning committee and the board asked for a staff report on housing options in the early spring of 2023. There was a resolution to make an alteration to the OCP housing density policies for areas A, B, and C, so that density would be defined as the limitations put in place by the Ministry of Health. That motion was later rescinded. We asked for a staff report on floor area ratio and building coverage ratio. We've done housing needs assessment, housing reports and studies. I believe that the community does want to see action on this matter. Now, one of the issues that comes up is we have a very large region and a very small amount of it is actually impacted by our zoning bylaws and our regulations, but also a very small amount of our areas is really even targeted for housing. So for the Area B official community plans, the lands with the designation that would allow for housing in my mind and based on the OCP is rural residential, low density residential, suburban residential, manufactured home park, commercial recreation are the main lands in question. We're not talking about private managed forest land or resource or parkland or even the ALR. So I was wondering how much of the land that actually is. So in Area B, it's roughly 600 to 650 hectares of land, which falls under that kind of designation. Now, of that land, roughly 170 hectares is impacted by our regional district zoning bylaws. And that limits and restricts the parcel owners from being able to participate in the residential flexibility, which is existing in the rest of the area, and our housing diversity, which is in our strategic plan. So these zoned areas representing about 25 to 30% are increasingly inconsistent with the development on the other 70 to 75%. And that's just Area B. So I don't know Area A or Area C or Area D. So this is where my thoughts were coming from was how do we create the residential flexibility within those zoned communities? Not because one that jumps out at my mind, but in order to change those policies in the zoning bylaw around housing, those housing policies stem from our official community plan housing policies. So my thoughts are, we've asked for enough reports, we've done enough studies, and I think it's time to form a working group to come back with options so that we can get moving on real action related to housing. And I've had members of the community who are experts in various fields that have said like, hey, how do we get involved with, changing these policies, and they want to provide input. And I'll just say that, I have ideas, but I'm not an expert in those fields. And I think that might be a good way forward to come back with options. So.
The other directors? Director Banner.
Thanks, Chair. I voted against this when it came around the first time. I'm going to vote against it again. I just don't see it as an efficient use of staff time. And as was mentioned, the vast majority of our area is not impacted by zoning bylaws. And I haven't heard any complaints or concerns about any of my constituents about this issue. Where there are no zoning bylaws, we have no restrictions. So as far as diversity goes, they can do whatever they like for the most part. And as far as working groups concerning housing, there are working groups that are established in the community, involving organizations that do provide housing. So I don't see it as an efficient use of staff time. Thanks.
Yep, Director McCormick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I tend to feel the way that Director Brander does. I see no relevance for Area D in doing this because, again, we have no restrictions and anyone that wants to build housing can certainly do so. And we've got everything from tiny homes to, big, large estates. So, it's the diversity is happening naturally. I believe the marketplace tends to, encourage diversity and, is doing a good job really of doing that because we're certainly densifying, and although our growth is small, it is growing. But I don't see the relevance of another group. I think we've got enough tools in our toolbox that staff can use to support housing initiatives. And I just kind of see this as a lot of opportunity for busy work that isn't necessarily going to get us to the place we want to be. So I'm not in support of this motion. I was not in support of it before. And I believe we just need to carry on, work within our OCPs and just move forward. We don't need this working group. And that's my opinion.
Okay, Director Doe.
Yeah, I don't usually say much at these meetings, but I want to know what happened when I go home. So my understanding is that there is a motion in the package 9.1, and that's a motion that was passed at a previous meeting. The chair has moved reconsideration, and that means that when the chair asks all those in favor, if all those in favor are the majority, then this will not happen.
Corporate officer.
Is that the case?
Help me out here. Yes.
I just think that's kind of a yes or no question.
It's a good question in case we get into.
Thank you, through the chair, no. So this motion failed at a previous meeting. And so we're moving.
We've revived it, right?
Yeah, and so if this motion, so now we're reconsidering the motion. So if we vote in favor, then I believe it would be passed. Is that?
I think he thinks there's supposed to be a vote about whether to reconsider or not.
Oh.
I think it's a vote about whether to reconsider.
And I think that was his question.
Oh, okay.
Not an original vote. That's why I'm asking the question, because it seems to me that different people have different ideas about what a yes vote would mean. And my question is a simple one for the corporate officer or the chair. If people vote yes, what will happen to this paragraph of instructions?
Corporate officer, my understanding is we vote yes, that this passes. So
through the chair, if there's a if there's a majority vote, then this motion will pass and goes forward.
And that reading there will be what happens. Okay.
okay, good.
I wasn't sure that was the case. I thought it might be
well, we got it clear now. So I'm going to add my name to the speakers list. I am in favor of this. Obviously, I brought it back. I think that my experience in area A and area B, I have had people reaching out to me. They have mentioned different ideas. FAR is one of them, but ideas, right? And the reality on the ground is not reflective of what I'm seeing in the community. I think that my experience through my working career is that establishing a side group that can concentrate, doesn't have to be super onerous or overwhelming. I think what we've realized is we've got ideas, but we want to understand how to incorporate them or not into our existing materials. So my idea of the working group is just that, take it away from our meetings here where we really don't have a chance to kick things around. We have one or two opportunities to speak and then we have to make a decision. I'm finding for me that doesn't work, just being honest. And then I think a working group would accomplish the objective and we might learn something. So that's my FSC director. Go ahead, Director Elliott.
Oh, thank you. I also don't have a vote in this. I just had a comment. Areas that are impacted are looking for a discussion about this through a working group to see if they can discuss some of the ideas, pinpoint them, maybe get a little more focused with what they come back to staff with, because we haven't had a lot of success in their minds that are going to work for those areas that are impacted. it seems that the planning committee is kind of small, and areas that maybe don't have regulation may not see the value in that, but it doesn't, I think, look well to block the areas that do have an issue just because your area doesn't. And the working together spirit of CATHET would be to try to consider everybody's areas when you're making your decisions as far as these kinds of things go. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay,
Thanks.
appreciate your input. I see Director Gisborne was first.
Oh,
Okay, Director McCormick. I'll second round. Go ahead, Director McCormick.
Okay, thanks. Just to Director Elliott's point, I believe that areas that require, additional diversity in their housing types can do that through their official community plans. And as each one is updated, then that diversity would be built in to the OCPs. So yeah, I'm not seeing the need for this working group when we already have a process of addressing diversity, and that is through our official community plan reviews and updates. So I'm not convinced.
Go to Ms. Rodney. I see your hand there.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, I just wanted to remind the committee that there is a housing roundtable, and it is actively running and meeting monthly, and planning staff have been attending when we can. Generally it's been every other meeting, but there is good representation there from all the housing nonprofit societies who are the real champions in creating affordable housing for those in core housing need and extreme housing need. And the city CAO is very active on that roundtable, and she comes with a strong background as director of planning for a city in Nanaimo. And so she has a lot of lessons learned from there that she brings to the table. And I know they are trying to encourage the development community to attend as well. They've had funding like CMHC and BC Housing make presentations on funding. So that is a really active working group already that the directors could attend.
Can I ask you when they meet and where?
The next meeting is Monday, August 12th. We meet at the library, and yeah, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Okay, thank you. Director Gisborne.
is that working group a regional district working group? And is their mandate to change or bring back options for our official community plan housing policies?
Yep.
Sure. It's a collaborative working group.
So it's not ours.
It's not ours. It's a collaborative. With
Yeah, we've got I think we got the answer. So we're involved with our planning stuff. Yeah, Director Elliott.
Thank you. The Housing Roundtable is trying to focus on projects that they can do to get housing initiated. So I don't believe that this particular topic would be a topic at the Housing Roundtable. They would be looking for opportunities where changes were already made and could accommodate the types of housing projects that they're looking to do, rather than trying to tackle a revision on the official community plan in an area type thing. So that's just I'm also on the roundtable. I know we're looking at projects. We're not looking to change an official community.
I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Is that working group a regional district working group? And is their mandate to change or bring back options for our official community plan housing policies?
Talk about housing. It has no mandate to make any planning
It's a collaborative
for the
working
regional
group.
district or
So it's
behalf
not
of the city. It's a group of
It's
people
not
that are
ours,
interested in
it's a
housing.
collaborative.
In my
Yeah,
mind,
we've got the,
that is
I
a
think we
very
got the
different
answer,
thing.
so we're
And the
involved.
planning
With
committee,
everybody,
which is
so, yeah.
elected
Director Elliott.
representatives. that
Thank
have
you. The
ability
Housing
to affect
Roundtable is trying to
policies.
focus on
Thank you.
projects that they can do to get
Ms. Rodman, I think I saw
housing
your hand again.
initiated, so I don't believe that
Thank
this
you. Yes,
particular
through the chair.
topic
The
would
other
be a
thing,
topic at the Housing Roundtable.
I just wanted
They would
to
be
remind the
looking for
committee of was
opportunities
the,
where changes were already made
housing
and
needs
it could
assessment
accommodate the types of housing
recommendation,
projects that they're looking to do,
do
rather than
recommend
trying to
collaborating with the
tackle
city. And
a
that's
revision on the official
primarily
community
due to
plan
the
in the
lack
area
of
type thing.
infrastructure
So that's
servicing
just,
in rural
I'm
areas
also on the
and the
roundtable. I know we're
inability
looking at
to,
projects. We're not looking to
support, yeah,
change an official community.
multi-unit type
Thank
developments.
you.
So
Is that
I know
working
about
group,
housing
a regional
development.
district working group?
that
Not
And
a
is their
member of it.
mandate to
really
change
Collaborative group
or
of
bring back
citizens of the
options
that
region
type of
for our
development
official community plan housing
municipality who
policies?
talk about
areas,
housing.
and that's why the
It has
OCP
no
is
mandate
structured.
to make any
It's a
planning
collaborative.
Director
decisions
Gisborne, round two
in
here.
the district or
So it's
behalf
not
of
us.
the city. It's a group
So,
of people
not
that are
ours.
maybe I'm getting a
interested in
little
housing.
confused.
In my mind,
We've got the.
that
I
is
My
a
think we've got
understanding
the
was in
answer,
the
so we're
areas that
involved,
aren't
with
zoned,
everybody,
whose
so,
elected
Director Elliott.
representatives.
restrictive
The
policies
Housing
are not an
Roundtable is trying to
issue
focus on
because
projects that
we
they
are
can do
not
to get
Ms. Rodman,
blocking
I think I saw your hand.
individuals
initiated, so
from
I don't
having those
believe that this
Thank you.
particular
Yes, through the
topic
chair. The
would
other
be a
thing,
because
topic
the
at the Housing
infrastructure is
Roundtable.
being provided by the property
I
owners.
just wanted
They would
to
be
remind
looking for
There's lots in the
opportunities
electoral
where
areas and the
changes were already
unzoned
made
areas.
and it could
assessment
And
accommodate the
I'm
types of housing
referring to
projects
the other
that they're looking
25
to
to
do, rather
30%
than
that
trying
are
to
being
collaborating
restricted
with the
tackle
city.
by the local government.
And
a
that's
revision on the
It's
primarily
official
true, we
community
are
plan
not
in
providing
the
the
area type
service.
thing.
infrastructure.
The
So
parcel
that's
owners
just,
can provide the
areas.
service.
I'm also
They
on
can
the-
provide
on
the
the round-
infrastructure. Wells, water systems, sewage treatment systems that exists outside of the local government's mandate that falls under the Ministry of Health's jurisdiction. And because it's already happening and it is allowed by the provincial government, that the intention of this motion is to come back with options for our housing policies in the official community plan, which can then guide our zoning bylaws. Yes, I would love to do an updated OCP for Area B or Area C. Those motions have been put forward in the past. They have not been supported. And one of the discussions that came up was, well, if we can get some options of policies, we can then use those options when we update our OCP through a full comprehensive rewrite of the OCP. Or we could do what District of Sechelt did, which is you propose an amendment to your existing OCP to update your housing policies, which is very similar to the motion that we passed last May, which was to change our housing policies, the motion that we then later rescinded. So I have some ideas, but I'm just one person, and I concur with the chair that around this table, we can't really get into the details. We can't dig into, you know, what is Ministry of Health policy or guidelines or requirements, because those three things are very different. They might say this is what we recommend, but then they'll say this is what we require. And of course, out in the electoral areas where there isn't zoning, everyone is having to follow with those requirements and there is enforcement. So the intention is that this does affect members of our community. It is about diversity of housing throughout our region, which is consistent with our strategic plan. And it is Cathet, it is working together. So I would like to see a bit more consistency with our zoned areas, meeting the objectives of our strategic plan, our housing policies, and, you know, Area B's housing policies from 2012. I think some things have changed, and I think we're hearing requests from the community. I think, what was it, last November, we had correspondence from people on Nootka that were saying, hey, let's crack open that zoning bylaw again to have a look at it. But you can't really change the zoning bylaws housing policies without really digging into the OCP's housing policies, because that's the high level document. So that's why I support this. Well, unless the planning committee wants to actually give direction to change the housing policies, but so far we haven't.
Through the chair, and that just another reminder that areas that are affected by zoning bylaws, every property owner does have the right to apply for an OCP amendment, or OCP and zoning amendment to allow for a higher density. So
it's a good reminder. Yeah.
We just recently processed an application up on Nootka where the density being proposed was too high
Mhm.
to be acceptable, but that was an extreme case. There could be other examples where someone wanted a lower density where it would be supported.
Okay.
That option is available to every property owner.
Thank you. I think, don't see any other hands. I just, as my final comment, I think just our discussion today has once again identified that there's some tentacles that I'd like to explore in a more open working group so that we can parse it out. And I know I'll learn a lot and I'll be able to talk to my constituents a lot better as I move ahead. So I'm in support of the motion. I don't see any other hands, so we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the recommendation. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if Director McCormick was asking.
Director McCormick, you have a final comment or are you voting?
I have a final comment, and that I believe in working together, but that means working together with our individual communities. And I believe the opportunity exists in each individual area to update our official community plans and incorporate whatever housing, needs and wants the community has into those official community plans. I don't see the value in working outside of that process because actually I believe that process works very well. It's community driven through an advisory committee made up of local people who know their area. And so I think the current process is certainly there in place for people to use, and updates can happen through that process through our OCPs. So again, I just come back to, I don't see the additional value in doing this.
All right, we've had our couple of rounds. I think we've all had our say. I'm going to put the matter to a vote.
I have a question.
Okay, a question for the chair.
A question for Director McCormick in
Oh,
response.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to allow that. We're going to follow our procedure. We've had a chance to
The
vote.
procedure says I am allowed to respond to other.
No, I'm going to call the vote. I've already said that. I allowed one comment and probably shouldn't have done that. So I'm going to call the vote now. All those in favor of the motion? That's Director Gisborne and myself. Those opposed? Director Brander and Director McCormick, I guess that's defeated. Okay.
I have a notice of motion
Yes.
for our next meeting. The committee recommend the board to direct staff to update and start the process for an electoral area B official community plan update. And I look forward for the support from the director from Texada.
Okay, thank you for that. Are we good there? Is that appropriate where we are?
Sorry, a notice of motion.
Yep.
If you accept it, then we can put it in the minutes.
Yeah, I'm accepting that. We don't have to put it to a vote or anything.
No, it's not.
Okay,
It's
good. It's
for
just a
next month.
Okay, good stuff. Seeing nothing else, question period. Do we have media or anybody else?
Hi, Chair Galinsky from the Peak Online. I don't have any questions this morning. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Galinsky. I don't see an in-camera session. We are adjourned.
Yes, that's at 12:30.
Record. you.